Have you ever found yourself in a situation where all the exits seemed blocked? Where despair took over and you asked yourself, why is this happening to me? What if I told you that right now, God is silently preparing a way? Even when all seems lost, He is opening doors that you cannot yet see. Imagine what it would be like to discover that right in front of you, there is a surprising solution prepared by Him. In this video, you will understand how, in the most difficult moments, faith in God not only brings answers, but also transforms your life. If you are looking for a new beginning, the answer may be here, closer than you think. There are times in life when everything seems to fall apart. The doors that once seemed open close all at once, and despair takes over. Feeling trapped is an overwhelming sensation, as if there is no way out, as if you are surrounded by insurmountable walls. It is natural that, in these moments, hope fades, and trust in God is tested. Anyone who has been through this knows the weight on their chest, the anguish of trying to solve a problem, but all solutions seem distant or non-existent. However, even when circumstances seem uncontrollable, it is important to remember that despair can be an invitation to reflection. At these times, many ask themselves, where is God? It seems that, when one needs Him most, divine silence intensifies. But it is precisely in this silence that faith must grow. When all doors are closed, it can be a sign for the person to seek divine providence in unexpected places. After all, how many times in life has the solution not appeared when the person least expected it? A practical example of this feeling is the search for a job. Someone who, for months, sends out resumes, participates in interviews, but does not get any opportunities. Despair grows, bills pile up, and the person begins to doubt their own ability. However, faith and trust in God can bring a new perspective. Perhaps that time of waiting is paving the way for something greater. Perhaps it is time to learn a new skill, or rediscover a talent that can open doors that previously seemed closed. Therefore, although despair is a human reaction, it is important not to let it overwhelm you. Trust in God must be strengthened in these moments. Even if everything seems to be falling apart, you need to believe that there is a greater purpose behind each challenge. Like a seed that needs to be buried in the darkness in order to later blossom, so too can the life of someone who goes through despair. This is just the beginning of a new path. Many times in the rush of life, people expect clear and visible signs of God's presence in their situations. However, it is precisely in the moments of greatest silence that He is working most profoundly. It is difficult to understand this when the feeling of abandonment takes over, when despair makes it seem as if God is distant. But God's silence does not mean His absence. It is in these moments that He shapes trust and strengthens faith to levels that the person never imagined reaching. In many situations, God's silence is, in fact, a time of preparation. Think of a farmer who plants his seed. He doesn't see it grow right away, but he knows something is happening underground. God works in this way in our lives. He works invisibly, preparing a path that we can't yet see. Doors that seem closed today are being shaped to open at the right time, revealing the plan He has for each of us. Impatience can arise when silence goes on for too long, and it's common for people to try to solve things on their own. However, this is the time to practice trusting in God. When there are no immediate answers, it's essential to believe that God is in control of every detail. A practical example is when someone prays for an urgent financial solution and doesn't see an immediate answer. Silence can seem discouraging, but it could be during this time that God is creating future opportunities, such as a new job opportunity or an unexpected miracle. Therefore, in moments of silence, instead of despairing, we need to strengthen our hope and remember that God works behind the scenes. He knows what is best for each person, even when they don't see anything happening. Trusting in God, even in silence, is an act of faith that opens doors to miracles and provisions that only He can perform. When life presents us with impossible situations, it is essential to remember who God is. He is the creator of all, the one who transforms what seems like the end into a new beginning. In Isaiah 43:16, we find a powerful image of God parting the sea so that His people could pass through. This supernatural act is not just an old story. It is a constant reminder that God specializes in opening paths where there are none. When all doors are closed, He makes a new door emerge from the impossible. It is easy to forget this in the midst of difficulties. Daily worries can cloud the vision of what God can do. When bills are piling up, health is fragile, or relationships are in crisis, feelings of helplessness take over. But it is precisely in these situations that God acts most powerfully. He never leaves us without a solution, even when we do not see an immediate way out. Just as he did with the people of Israel when he parted the Red Sea, he continues to make the impossible happen in the lives of those who trust in him. If we stop to think about it, we will see that God has a habit of acting in ways that surpass our logic. He surprises us when we least expect it. An everyday example would be someone who, after losing a job, feels lost. However, this loss can be the beginning of a better path, with opportunities that the person would never have imagined. God opens doors that human eyes cannot see at first, but that end up revealing themselves over time. Trusting in the God who creates paths where none exist is an act of faith. It invites us to let go of control and rest in the certainty that he is already working on our behalf. As Isaiah says, "He is the Lord who makes a way in the desert and rivers in dry places." When everything seems barren and lifeless, God brings hope and opens doors that were previously completely invisible. Throughout the Bible, we see God acting in moments of total impossibility, opening doors that no one could have imagined. One of the most well-known examples is the parting of the Red Sea in Exodus 14. The Israelites were trapped, with no apparent way out. On one side, the sea; on the other, the approaching Egyptian army. The desperation was palpable. However, in a miraculous act, God parted the sea, creating a safe path for his people. This episode is not only a historical narrative, but a powerful symbol that God always provides a way out, even in the most difficult circumstances. Another impressive testimony is that of Joseph, who was sold into slavery by his own brothers, faced injustices, and was even unjustly imprisoned. It seemed that all doors were closed to him. However, in a surprising act of divine providence, God elevated him from prison to the position of governor of Egypt. Joseph's journey shows us that even when life seems directionless, God is preparing something greater. What seemed like the end was actually the beginning of a grand plan. These biblical examples serve to remind us that God acts in times of despair and confusion. Just as he parted the Red Sea for the Israelites and exalted Joseph in the midst of adversity, he can open unexpected doors in anyone's life today. Perhaps someone is facing similar challenges, a difficult financial situation, an illness, or a family crisis. In these moments, it is crucial to remember that just as God was faithful in the past, he continues to be faithful now. The same God who parted seas and promoted slaves is still active, working miracles. These testimonies encourage us to trust fully in divine providence. Even if we cannot see how or when, God is always at work, ready to open doors that lead to overcoming and miracles. He transforms the most adverse situations into opportunities for growth, leaving a legacy of faith for those who seek him. The deserts of life may seem endless, but it is in these moments that God works in a special way in us. Just as the people of Israel spent years wandering in the desert before entering the Promised Land, we are often led down dry and lonely paths. It is natural for impatience to grow, for people to question why it is taking so long. But in every desert, there is a purpose. God uses these periods to shape our character, strengthen our faith, and prepare us for something greater that we cannot yet see. In times of waiting, we learn valuable lessons that would not be possible in times of ease. The desert is a place where we are challenged to trust God completely. The provision of manna for the Israelites in the desert is a clear example that, even in the midst of scarcity, God provides what is needed. So when we feel without resources or without direction, we must remember that God is sustaining us daily, sometimes in ways that we do not immediately realize. The desert is not a punishment, but a divine school. In practice, these moments of waiting can manifest themselves in many ways: a dream postponed, a job opportunity that does not open, or a relationship that does not evolve. But in each of these moments, God is shaping us. He teaches us to trust in his promises, even when we cannot see the end of the desert. Just as an athlete who trains daily, even without seeing immediate results, we must persevere in the confidence that the time of waiting is preparing us for something greater. These periods of desert also teach us to value what is to come. When we finally reach the Promised Land, we better understand the value of the lessons learned along the way. Faith, patience, and resilience are fruits that we reap after times of spiritual drought. Therefore, when crossing the desert, it is important to keep hope alive, knowing that God never leaves us alone and that there is a purpose in every step we take. In moments of despair, it is tempting to try to solve things on our own, taking shortcuts that seem promising. However, when we act without God's guidance, these shortcuts can turn into huge traps. A clear example of this in the Bible is the story of Abraham and Sarah. Impatient with God's promise that they would have a son, they decided to follow an alternative path, which resulted in the birth of Ishmael. Although this solution seemed immediate, it brought complications and conflicts that would reverberate for generations. This example shows us that when we try to force solutions, we can end up moving away from the perfect plan that God has for us. Often, what seems like a quick way out turns out to be a door that leads us to even more problems. In everyday situations, this can manifest itself when someone, for example, accepts a job opportunity that goes against their values, simply out of haste or fear of the future. The result can be an experience of stress and frustration, which could have been avoided with patience and trust in divine providence. The danger of taking shortcuts without God is that, instead of solving our problems, we can end up deviating from the original purpose. When we refuse to wait for God's right time, we run the risk of getting caught up in situations that will be difficult to get out of. To avoid this, it is essential to strengthen faith and patience, remembering that God's plans are always better, even when we do not understand what is happening at the moment. The waiting time may be long, but it is worth more than the problems generated by hasty shortcuts. Instead of giving in to the temptation to act on our own, the secret is to stay focused on prayer and trust in God. Faith allows us to wait in peace, knowing that the right door will open at the right time. It is important to learn from stories like that of Abraham and Sarah, understanding that hasty solutions can bring difficult consequences. God has a path prepared, and no matter how difficult it may be, the best thing to do is to trust and wait on Him. When despair knocks on the door, prayer becomes one of the most powerful tools we have. In moments of uncertainty, it connects us directly with God, bringing not only answers, but also peace and clarity. Sometimes, situations seem so confusing that we cannot see a way out. However, when we bend our knees and open our hearts, something powerful happens. Prayer is like a bridge that brings us closer to the heart of God, allowing us to experience His presence in the midst of chaos. Many wonder if prayer really makes a difference when all seems lost. The answer lies in the testimonies of lives transformed by faith. The Bible teaches us that the prayer of a righteous man has great power and effect. James 5:16. Rather than giving into despair, intensifying our prayer life in difficult times helps us see the doors that God is opening. A simple and practical example is praying for wisdom when faced with an important decision. This constant seeking of divine guidance brings clarity where there was previously confusion. Furthermore, prayer not only opens doors, but also transforms those who pray. By placing our anxieties before God, we are shaped by the peace that surpasses all understanding. It is as if prayer changes our perspective on problems. Situations that previously seemed hopeless begin to be seen as opportunities for God to act. And, instead of seeking immediate and impulsive solutions, the person learns to wait for the right time, trusting that each prayer is heard. Therefore, in moments of despair, prayer is not only a refuge, but an act of faith. It is in prayer that we find the strength to continue when it seems that all doors are closed. It sustains us and connects us to the power of God, who is capable of opening any door, solving any problem, and performing miracles beyond what we can imagine. Praying is like handing control over to God, knowing that He knows what is best, and that, in the right time, His divine providence will manifest itself. The doors that God opens are not always big and obvious. Often He acts discreetly, opening small opportunities that, at first glance, may seem insignificant. However, these small doors are part of a larger plan, and we need to be alert to recognize them. Sometimes we expect a great miracle or a radical change, but God can start with a small solution, a detail that will be the beginning of something much greater. Like a plant that begins with a tiny seed, God acts in ways that we often only understand later. These opportunities can arise in everyday life, in simple things. A practical example would be an unexpected job offer that, at first glance, does not seem ideal, but which reveals itself as the beginning of a path of growth. Or even a new friendship that brings advice and support in difficult times, this small door being God's way of caring for and guiding us. The problem is that often we are so focused on seeking grand solutions that we miss these smaller opportunities, which are right in front of us. Recognizing these small doors requires spiritual sensitivity and attentive faith. It is necessary to trust that God is working in every detail, no matter how small. Instead of focusing only on the great things, one must learn to appreciate and be thankful for the small things that happen. After all, these are the stepping stones that pave the way to something greater. The simple act of gratitude and acknowledgement can open up new possibilities, because by appreciating what has already been given, one shows that one is ready to receive more. Therefore, being attentive to the small doors is an exercise in faith and trust in God. He often tests our ability to recognize and appreciate what is around us. If we just wait for big events, we may miss the chance to see what God is already doing. Every small door that He opens is part of His perfect plan, and by trusting in the process, the bigger doors will also open in due time. The story of Job is one of the most profound demonstrations of trust in God, even in the midst of darkness. Job lost everything he had, his possessions, his family, and his health, and yet he kept his faith. He did not understand why he was going through so much suffering, but he chose to trust in God, even without seeing an immediate solution. This unshakable trust is a powerful example that, in moments of darkness, when all doors seem closed and despair knocks at the door, faith in God can be the light that guides the way. In the height of suffering, it is easy to question why things happen and even doubt God's goodness. Job went through this. He questioned and lamented, but he never abandoned his trust in the Lord. Just like him, it is natural that, in times of crisis, faith is tested. However, Job's example teaches us that, even without understanding the reasons, trusting in God is what keeps us standing. He knew that, despite everything, God was in control, and that in due time, divine justice and providence would manifest. The end of Job's story shows us that this trust was not in vain. God restored him and gave him twice as much as he had lost. This does not mean that every painful situation will be immediately or visibly reversed, but that God rewards the faithfulness of those who trust in Him, even in the darkest moments. Today, many face financial crises, personal losses, or emotional battles, and Job's example reminds us that trusting in God, even when all seems lost, leads us to overcome. Maintaining trust in God during the darkness is an act of profound faith. When a person does not see quick answers or open doors, Job's example serves as a guide. He showed that, despite suffering, God is always present, and His faithfulness results in restoration and healing. In times of uncertainty, remembering Job's story can help renew hope, knowing that God never abandons those who trust in Him, even in the most desperate situations. Often, in our eagerness to solve our problems, we want solutions to come quickly and immediately. However, the path that God prepares for us is not always the shortest or easiest. He works with a timing that is perfect, even if we do not understand it right away. Just as a traveler may choose a longer but safer road, God often guides us along paths that, at first glance, seem time-consuming, but that take us exactly to the destination He has planned for us. This waiting can be challenging because we live in a society that values quick results, but God's wisdom surpasses human understanding. Throughout the Bible, we see examples of how God works in times of waiting. One such example is the story of Moses. Although he knew that his destiny was to lead the people of Israel, it took 40 years of preparation in the desert before he was ready for this mission. The journey may seem long, but it is during this process that God shapes our character and strengthens our faith. In everyday life, this is reflected in many areas of life. Many people, for example, want immediate professional growth, but by trying to rush things, they can miss out on learning opportunities that would be essential in the future. The same goes for relationships, where patience and waiting on God's timing results in a more solid and lasting foundation. The path that seems more difficult may actually be the one that brings the most long-term benefits, both spiritually and personally. It is important to remember that although God's path may seem longer, He never leaves us alone on the journey. Each step is carefully guided. Each obstacle is an opportunity to trust more in His providence. When we finally reach the destination He has prepared, we look back and realize how much we have learned and grown. God's timing is not ours, but it is always perfect, and following this path leads us to true fulfillment and the peace that only He can give. Stories of overcoming and faith are not limited to the pages of the Bible. Today, many people face seemingly impossible challenges and, through trust in God, find paths that were previously invisible. A moving example is that of a businesswoman who, after years of financial struggle, decided to hand her problems over to God. The doors of her business were closing, and the feeling of despair grew. It was then that, through prayer, she found peace and began to see small opportunities arising. Little by little, these smaller doors became the basis for a new phase of success and stability. Another powerful testimony comes from a young man who was facing health problems. After receiving a devastating diagnosis, he found himself with no way out. Despite limited medical options, he chose to trust in God. During his treatment, he witnessed small miracles, from an unexpected improvement to the support of friends and family who appeared at crucial moments. He says that despite his fear, trusting in God was what kept him going. Today, he has recovered and uses his story to inspire others not to lose hope, even in the most difficult moments. These modern stories show that God continues to open doors, often in ways we cannot imagine. Another example is that of a single mother who, after losing her job, found herself facing great difficulties. Not knowing what to do, she devoted herself to prayer. Shortly after, she received a job offer in a field she had never considered, but which ended up being a great blessing. This job not only met her financial needs, but also brought her new friends and a new perspective on life. These contemporary testimonies reinforce the truth that God never abandons those who trust in Him. Just as in the past, He continues to act in powerful ways in people's lives. Modern stories of overcoming, faith, and open doors are living proof that God is always present, opening new paths for those who surrender to His will and wait for His timing. When someone chooses to trust in God's plan, an indescribable peace takes over their heart. This peace does not mean that problems will disappear immediately or that difficulties will not arise, but rather that there is the certainty that God is in control. When we understand that He already has a path mapped out, anxiety and despair give way to serenity. Trusting in God offers profound relief because the person stops carrying the burden alone and begins to depend on divine providence. In times of uncertainty, this peace is one of the greatest gifts that God can offer. By surrendering one's worries and trusting that God is working, one begins to experience a tranquility that is not easily shaken by circumstances. This is not passivity, but rather the awareness that, even in the most difficult moments, God is taking care of everything. A practical example would be someone who, in the midst of a financial crisis, instead of despairing, surrenders the situation to God and gradually begins to feel the peace of knowing that He will provide in the right way and at the right time. This peace transcends human understanding, as described in Philippians 4:7, and guards the heart and mind against thoughts of fear and uncertainty. It is trust in God that allows us to rest, even when the solution is not yet visible. When a person holds on to the promise that God is in control, he or she can deal with daily challenges without despair. Faith does not eliminate difficulties, but it brings the peace necessary to face them with serenity and confidence. Trusting in God, DNTM's plan, is a choice that brings ongoing peace. Even when we do not know exactly what the next step is, we can rest knowing that He has already mapped out the path. Each challenge can be seen not as an insurmountable barrier, but as part of the process that will lead us to something greater. And in this process, the peace that comes from trusting God makes the journey much lighter and full of hope. Faith has a transformative power that we often only realize when all other options seem exhausted. Isaiah 43:16 reminds us that God is the one who makes ways, even where there are none. When we exercise our faith, we connect with this truth and begin to see the doors that God is already opening, often in ways we do not expect. Faith acts like a key, unlocking opportunities that, to those who look only with their natural eyes, remain invisible. It is complete trust in God that allows us to move forward, even when the road ahead seems uncertain or difficult. When we place our hope in Him, a new path begins to form. Despair and anxiety can give way to expectation, because we know that God is already working on our behalf. It is not about having all the answers, but about believing that, by divine providence, the right path will emerge at the right time. Faith does not remove challenges, but it opens our eyes to see beyond difficulties. A clear example of this is in people who, even in the midst of deep crises, choose to trust in God. They do not know exactly how everything will work out, but they believe that something greater is coming. And over time, they begin to witness small changes, doors opening and opportunities arising. This is the effect of faith in action. Every step taken with trust in God is a declaration that, regardless of the current scenario, the path He has prepared will be revealed. Therefore, the new path that God offers opens up when we choose to walk by faith. Even if the situation seems unfavorable, trust in God is what guides us to new opportunities and solutions. As Isaiah describes, God is the creator of new paths in the desert and of rivers in dry lands. When all seems lost, faith shows us that with God, a new beginning is always about to emerge. We must continue to believe, knowing that He is already working on behalf of each one of us. Are you willing to trust God and wait for the right doors to open? Can you let go of your worries and instead of despairing, cultivate the peace that comes from faith? Remember, difficult times can be exactly what God uses to build something greater in your life. Your choices today can determine the path that opens up tomorrow. So, how about starting to apply this trust right now? If this message touched your heart and you want to learn more about how God works in our lives, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here you will continue to receive messages that strengthen your faith and help you see the doors that God is already opening for you.